Hello everybody, my name is Gina and I am currently doing a placement with SeeWhatSheCanDo. And today I'm going to be interviewing my amazing friend Marysa, who is here with us. And we are going to be talking about body image, eating disorders, and the pandemic. And so I've got a few questions ready for her to answer, but before we get into them, I thought I would let her introduce herself.
Hey, I'm Marysa. I'm so glad to be here today. I am 27 years old. I am from Montreal, Quebec, Canada. I love anything that has to do with really understanding who we are as a whole. So, our mind, body, and spirit, and really diving deep into what makes us who we are. And for me, that for me, what's really important is understanding my body, understanding my mind, and understanding what my heart is saying. So I'm super excited to be here today to talk about all of that good stuff, to talk about health, body image, and everything. So glad to be here with you today.
Thanks for coming, Marysa. um, yeah, so we're going to start off with obviously, we mentioned that we're going to be talking about body image and eating disorders today. And so I want to just start off with Marysa, you just kind of giving us a little introduction to your story with that.
For sure. So I started to develop struggles with food. I would say at the age of 16. Um, I started to view food as something that I should be afraid of, as an enemy, as something that was scary, and not as something that would nourish my body, but rather something that would ruin my body, which is entirely not what food does. So I started to develop this unhealthy pattern about what it meant to eat food, and I craved the feeling of hunger rather than the feeling of full. And I think when I started to realize that when I didn't eat, it equaled me being a certain size and having control over the way I looked, it brought me a sense of satisfaction, I guess, and it led me into this downward spiral from there of losing way too much weight than what was healthy for my body.
Absolutely. And that started around what age?
It started around the age of 16 years old. But I would say it really took full force when I was 17.
Mm-hmm.
And it started at a summer camp where I didn't like the food there. Um, I didn't like any of the food. I found it gross. And I was working at this summer camp for a few months. And I was like, okay, well, I don't like the food, so I'm not going to eat it. And I'm going to come back looking awesome. I'm going to just not eat and make sure that I lose all the weight I can lose. And that again, this was a very unhealthy way of thinking, and it led me to being attracted to that feeling that I got when I didn't eat, and the way I looked, and the attention that I got from that as well.
Absolutely. So what would you say would have been like the thing that triggered this? So you said it started around like 16, 17, but what started it all?
Mm-hmm. I would say what started this eating disorder is not solely my relationship with food and how I saw it as scary, but also underlining health issues. So I have a history of a lot of stomach issues, where I would bloat when I would eat certain foods. I would get headaches. I would get fatigue. So food was always kind of something I wasn't fully confident with. I would think, oh, if I eat this, am I gonna like get bloated? Am I gonna get like acid reflux? Am I gonna get a headache? Like
Yeah.
all that not nice stuff, right?
Yeah.
So from that, I guess that started in high school, and that triggered this idea like food is not your friend. Food can hurt you. Food can cause you to have issues in your body. So that, I guess that's the one of the roots of what happened when I started to avoid food and not eat it. And additionally, I think a lot of it is also rooted in this feeling of I wasn't happy with who I was. I wasn't happy with the way I looked. I wasn't happy with Marysa, and I thought, hey, if I want to be happy, I need to take control. And in a certain aspect, there's nothing wrong with wanting to fix something about yourself or like grow something to gain more confidence, but my root and my mentality behind it was not healthy. And the root, as I said before, was fear of food and fear of not being good enough and fear of not looking beautiful. Um, just to give another little background story, as a young girl, I grew up always as the chubby one. So I started to have baby fat, as one would call it, when I went through puberty. And I was always the big girl in the room. Not that I was big, but in my opinion, I was big, I guess. And I would sometimes get like picked on about it or like called fat, and it developed this fear in me, like I will never want to be called fat again. Like I'm going to prove people wrong that I'm not fat. And I think that idea was planted in my head at a young age that Marysa, you're fat. Nobody likes you because you're fat and you're chubby, and all those negative thoughts that filled my mind at the young age of like 9, 10 years old. And that's really sad. And I worked hard to avoid that feeling and avoid being
Mhm.
rejected
Yeah.
again because of the way I looked. And I thought, well, I look skinny now. I look great. So I guess that means I'm accepted.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess that's also a little bit of a root cause and
That-
background.
what had an influence. It's so interesting. It makes me think about how I look back at like the last like 10 years ago when we were in high school, and I think we didn't necessarily have many. I don't feel like body diversity was a big thing, and I feel like now, like at the age of 27, like even maybe in the last year, 2, 3 years, I feel like it's become more like accepted and more just like
Celebrated.
embraced and celebrated.
Mm-hmm.
Not like I think at the end of the day, you need to be healthy, like,
Mm-hmm.
and healthy, I think, looks and feels differently for
Uh-huh.
certain people. No one's gonna look the same, body wise, and so I think that's a very interesting point that you bring up. Like we had this like very, one dimensional like view of like fat
Beauty.
and skinny and beauty. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like just like body shapes in general. And so it was, I feel like there was a lot of, societal um, and culture influence on that, which,
Exactly.
essentially affects you because you're so young and um, impressionable, right? So,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
yeah. And so it's been 10 years since the
That's
start of
great.
that, which is
Mm-hmm.
crazy. Um, and you've obviously like been through a lot, and I'm sure it has been a journey. What would you say, like, what has that journey looked like in the last 10 years? Like, obviously it's a long time. You don't need
Yeah.
to go through every single detail, but I mean, you're here now today. Um, how would how would you describe where you are now? I guess you can start by describing where you are now and how you view yourself now, and then kind of delve into like what led you, like what steps or like what you did or what helped you move forward in this journey in a healthy way.
For sure. Um, Good question. So I would say it has been 10 years, and you actually just made me realize that. That's
Yeah, it's
crazy.
literally 10 years
Wow.
ago, which is crazy.
I'm glad I can talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, so I would say the first step for me finding healing in this difficult, very prominent struggle that was in my life for a good few years was um, finding a safe community that I could speak to and share with
Yeah.
about what was happening. And that took courage and it took strength, because to admit that you have a problem with food it's difficult because in a way I liked that I had my own little
Yeah.
struggle. I don't know. It felt like comforting that I had this
The
thing that was
security.
allowing me to not be fat, quote
Yeah.
unquote. So when I chose to speak out about it, it brought me into this place of recognizing this is a problem and you need to fix it. So I found a group of people that I was able to share this with, and I remember I did this exercise with them, and it was we stood in front of a mirror, and they spoke. It was a few girls, and they spoke over me what they saw, and when they did that, it opened up my heart to see, whoa, like how I see myself is not how people are seeing myself.
Mm.
And I had to realize how much I was relying on people around me to define who I was. But the way I thought they were seeing me was not at all how they were actually seeing me. And I recognized I was putting this imaginary world in my head about how I thought people would perceive me as, or how I wanted people to perceive me as, because of, again, fear of being rejected, and
Yeah.
recognizing, hey, the only person who can define me personally as someone who's Christian, who has a faith in Jesus, was like, hey, the only person who can define me is God and myself. And of course, like, your environment and your community affects and shapes you.
Yeah.
But that brought a lot of freedom. And I said, no more trying to please people, no more trying to be accepted by people to the point of self-destruction to fit into a mold, but
Mhm.
rather I'm going to celebrate who I am. I'm going to be who I am with joy, with
Yeah.
confidence, and with freedom. So
Absolutely.
this this freedom, this joy, this confidence came through community, through speaking about it, and through also seeking professional help, I would say, of course. And um, yeah, I would say that's pretty much the process, and choosing every day to pay attention to what's going on in here, and
Yeah.
not letting my thoughts control me, but
Absolutely.
being aware of what I'm letting inside my mind.
It's really good. And how would you describe how you see yourself today?
So how I see myself today would be someone who someone who's gone through the fire and who has come out um, more bold and with a better understanding for herself and others.
Mhm.
Um, I have a blog, and not that I write on it often, but I have a blog, and it's called Beauty from Ashes. And I chose that name because it reminded me that we need to go through the fire sometimes, become just ashes, and then
Yeah.
to then recognize what our beauty is.
Nice.
Um, so that's kind of what I feel. I feel I've gained a strength and a wisdom and a compassion for other people
Yeah.
that drives me to want to love more, to serve more. I would consider myself a loving person and an
Yeah.
open person because of the steps I took to healing and the steps I took to changing the way I see myself and
Yeah.
others.
And someone who is also healthy, like wholeheartedly healthy, like in, physically, mentally, emotionally, I would add as well. I just was just thinking about how it's so interesting. Like, just going back to you mentioning community, was also played a role in
Mm-hmm.
you just being able to overcome this struggle. It's interesting how, people in general could be the reason, we fall. Like, just like people, like people's thoughts, people's opinions of us, or even things people have said, but then not necessarily those same people. It could be, but people, another example is like, it's kind of this, like, what I'm trying to talk about is like this like image of it's like people could be the thing that brings us down, but then people could also be the thing, community, people could also be the thing that, like, brings us back
Exactly.
into this place of, where we're comfortable and where we're living a healthy lifestyle, which is so interesting. It's, yeah, it's
I agree 100%.
it's interesting to think about it that way, but that's really cool. I love that. And I think another thing to note is that, and I know you would agree with this, but it's not like, obviously this happened over a 10-year period. So it's not there's not necessarily a formula to just like, hey, I struggled,
Quick fix.
A plus B equals, I've overcome. I'm now like have a healthy view of myself and my body and a healthy view of exercise and health. It's very much a process, right? And so that also means, and I just want to highlight the fact that you're not necessarily, like, you do have days where you still like have to remind yourself, right, of the truth, and that, okay, maybe, like, I don't know, do you have days still where you feel like, okay, I want to control my like eating, get back into that place, and you kind of have to, hey, Marysa, come on, like, or like even invite, your husband or a friend into it, and just,
About it.
yeah.
Absolutely. I would say it's easy to fall into bad patterns with my food, and to this day. Like, there was a time recently where I was skipping breakfast purposely because I wanted to lose some weight. And then I sat down with myself and I'm like, well, like, fasting is like a big thing now. Like, people are doing it, super trendy, so it's healthy. And I sat down with myself and I was like, wait, is it actually healthy for you? Is this something that is actually bringing you joy? And then I thought, I'm like, no, like, I'm starving in the morning. I can't work because I'm so hungry and I'm like, can't focus and I feel like cranky.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is not worth it. Like, again, it was turning into a bad pattern and like an eating disorder pattern, because that's what I used to do. Like, I would hurt myself by not eating and starving and fainting and all that yucky stuff to be a certain size, and that's what caused the eating disorder. So I was like, this seems like a little bit of a not a good situation that's happening. So I stopped doing that and I told myself, you are going to eat 3 meals a day and you're going to enjoy your 3 meals of the day. And it's okay. And I guess the other side of the picture is, as well, when I started to eat normal again, quote unquote, started to eat full meals and eat bread, which was like a no for me, and like sugar and candy and all that fun stuff. It almost like did a reverse thing where I was like binging almost, and I would be like, snacks, food all the time, delicious. And it did bring a sense of freedom, and I think I needed that season to do that. But then again, that's not necessarily always healthy. So I had to then relearn, like, what does it mean to have a balanced diet? And that's why I'm so passionate about like nutrition, because I love that. I love learning about what it means to have a healthy relationship with what's on your plate. So I love colors in my food and like greens and all that stuff. So I guess that's, like, to answer your question, it has been a process, and it's a process of learning how to be wise with the way my pattern of eating, and to be one extreme to the next, but to find that perfect middle ground, that balance with my food.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up the word balance. I was going to say it really is a balance. I don't think I know one person who does it perfectly. I think we're meant, like, as humans, like, we're meant to do things in moderation. Like, there needs to be a balance of moderation, but then also, allowing yourself to divulge is it? I don't think the word is divulge, but indulge. I meant indulge.
Indulge.
I was like, what was the word? To indulge and to, have, a good balance of moderation and then treating ourselves, like allowing ourselves to enjoy. Like I know for me, I'm someone who genuinely enjoys food. Like I love food. I love cooking. I love good quality ingredients. I love making like hearty meals. Like I love making really delicious meals. And so I think but I also, I need to finding the balance. And it's also allowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission to, indulge, but then also giving ourselves grace when it doesn't look like what we want it to look like.
Exactly.
And when we, maybe gain a few pounds than we would like to, or, yeah. And I
COVID
mean,
has not helped with the extra pounds.
I was just going to
But it's
transition into that.
okay.
It's funny because I know a lot of people have, called it, I think it's like my quarantine weight or like quarantine pounds. I don't know what the official term is, but I mean, I've heard it floating around. So what has a healthy lifestyle look like for you during quarantine, or what does a week look like for you now? Like,
For sure. So, I would say a healthy routine that I've done is having a good morning routine because it sets me up for the day and puts me in a healthy mindset.
yeah,
So just taking time to read and journal a little bit in the morning, to look outside, to go for a
yeah,
walk, it puts me right away in a good perspective, and I'm
yeah,
not more prone than to fall into bad thoughts or negative thinking about my body and
yeah,
about food. So that number one helps me during COVID and in general as well.
yeah.
And when it comes to exercise, I've been exercising about 3 times a week, and I feel exercise has been more of like a way to boost my mood, like to bring me joy, because
Release
you're
endorphin.
sitting all the
Yeah,
time when you're in your house, and like you're always sitting like at your desk when you're watching Netflix, when you're
that's,
FaceTiming your friends, and um, moving my body has been a way of like releasing all my energy and just bringing me joy. And
yeah,
I would say that's a big turnaround, because in the past I would work out for the sole purpose of having the perfect figure or the perfect body, and now it just feels more of a like a love that I'm giving myself, a gift that I'm
yeah,
giving myself, and the self-care.
yeah,
So that feels really gentle and nice, um,
yeah.
for myself in this time. And lastly, I would say that it's also about like finding, like I said, I'm passionate about learning about the benefits of what food does for your body. So
Yeah,
what are the foods I should be eating that have the most vitamins in it, and how does it
nutrients.
bring
Yeah,
make my skin nice? How does it uh, bring me energy? Because I find when you're inside all day and you're sitting, again, you get tired and you get fatigued more easily.
yeah,
So I think of like ways, what smoothie can I make today to boost my immune system or
yeah.
whatever. So
That's good.
I would say that's a little bit about how I've been coping in this time.
It's amazing. Thanks for sharing. Um, I have another question that I'd love to ask would be, um, so what advice would you give other women, um, who are struggling with body image, who are maybe where you were 10 years ago, or who are like in that process of overcoming? What would you say to them?
Yeah. I would say to slow down, to pause for a second, sit with yourself, and ask yourself why. Why are you doing what you're doing? What is the purpose behind it? What's motivating you? And to get real with yourself in that moment and to say, is this actually benefiting me, or is it bringing me more harm? And I think in
Yeah,
that moment, it's hard to recognize it as something harmful, but you do know deep down inside, um, you don't feel happy, you feel tired, you feel drained. And just again, recognizing the why behind everything that you're doing and then sharing it with somebody. So, going to see a counselor, going to talk to your friend. But I do recommend seeking a counselor and really just pouring out your heart to them and explaining the thoughts in your head that you're embarrassed to talk about, of how you see yourself, and just getting real and really pouring out your heart. And that takes courage and that takes boldness. And I know and I believe with all my heart that everyone has that inside of them. And everyone can move forward, and everyone has the ability to say yes, even in the most difficult situations. And I'm not saying this from a place of like being naive, but I'm saying it from a place of someone who has gone through difficult seasons and again come out of the fire feeling much stronger. And
Yeah.
it's not easy. I'm not saying, oh wow, like everything is so perfect when you do this, but slowly but surely healing will come. And it starts with the small yes, and it starts with the choice to love yourself, and to love yourself from a perspective of knowing your worth, knowing your value, and knowing that you are not defined by who people say you are, but
Yeah.
you are the only one who has the power to say who you are.
Yeah.
So, yes,
That's really good. That is really good. I think I would also add, I was just thinking that comparison plays such a huge, like has a such a huge role throughout the process, right? Like I'm sure you also came across that with,
for sure.
I feel like you're so, like we said, we're as teenagers or even just women, like young, we're in like a discovery process with self-identity and like just discovering who we are, what we like, what works for us. And I think we're very impressionable. And so we're easily influenced by other people, but also we can easily compare ourselves and hold ourselves to like standards that are not necessarily realistic for ourselves and for our lifestyle. So I would add that as well.
Exactly. Social media nowadays doesn't help. I can only imagine the extra pressure that brings to young women today, because back in the day, not that we're that old, but social media and like influencers were not really a thing. So I didn't have that much of a screen, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a comparison.
Like it wasn't as much in your face.
It came from other things, I guess, like magazines and YouTube.
Or like in person, right?
And in person, but can only
But I feel like now, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I would say even now at 27, it can still, creep up on me, those feelings of comparison. Because I mean, I think it's gonna happen my whole life. It's just gonna, yeah. So I can imagine being young and just like, like in that process of discovering who you are, like can make it even harder. But I'd like to just quickly, before we conclude, I'd like to just ask your thoughts on kind of like a healthy versus unhealthy way of viewing like physical activity. So, what would you say? I feel like you touched on it a little, but if you could kind of share your thoughts on that. I don't know. Was that clear?
Yeah. So you're asking like what is a unhealthy way of seeing physical activities versus what is the healthy way?
Yeah.
Basically.
And maybe, obviously from your personal,
from my personal perspective.
Experience. Perspective.
Sure. So kind of like, like you said, I did touch on it a little bit before. In the past, I would see exercise as a way to make sure that I was not if I would eat something, I would exercise to ensure that I wasn't going to gain weight right away from eating something. Scientifically, it does not happen. But I would for example, every night I would, trigger warning, every night I would do sit-ups, like 100 sit-ups,
Yeah.
just to make sure my stomach was flat. And that is so horrible. Anyways, so I would say now it's kind of like what I was saying before. It's more of like a gift I'm giving to myself. Like, Marysa, you deserve to work out. You should work out because you know what it brings you. It brings you joy and it brings you energy. And I love working out and feeling filled with energy, because I've like kind of said before, like I struggle with like fatigue and feeling tired and just like bleh. So working out helps me avoid that feeling, or at least helps, maybe not avoid, but helps me not to feel it as much. And yeah, I would say that's kind of like what it is. It's more of a fun activity now, and of course not solely like, I'm not solely thinking, oh, it's gonna be fun. I also think of like, ooh, like what can my body do? Like, can I make my butt bigger, or like can I make my waist smaller, or like all that stuff. But it's more of a like a curiosity than a it needs to be this way. It needs to be flat, and it needs to be like my stomach needs to be flat. I need to have abs, and it's more of like a what can happen if I try this program. And it's just fun.
That's a good differentiation. So it really comes down to the motive right behind it. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Which comes back to what you mentioned before, was ask yourself why. Which I think is important and just allows you to be more self-aware, right, of why you're doing what you're doing. Okay, this is really good. Yeah, I love this. I love this because I think having these conversations really, I think sometimes there's a negative connotation around like physical, like exercise and health. Like, I think it feels more like something we need to strive to be or do than like that we can like naturally like incorporate into our lives, because it's good for us and it's fun, like you said, and like it makes us feel good, and it just produces really good, it has good benefits. And so I think this conversations like these really help break down those negative connotations, and just those like icky feelings we get around those words, or if we hear those words. Because I know I used to have that with working out and exercise. It didn't feel like something, it felt like more like I had to versus I wanted to. Like a chore, and I had to look a certain way. It was always came down to that. And so I think, like you, like when I became to realize that, oh, it makes me feel good, and like what a privilege it is to be able to move my body, and like like I have a body that I can move, I get to move, which changing our our perspective on it really, I think, helps. That was really good. I want to thank you for joining me today, and just sharing your story and encouraging other women who may be watching this, and even just being vulnerable with where you've been, and also how this is very much a continuous journey, and it's a choice that you make, right? And so I just want to thank you for being with me today and talking about body image and eating disorders.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day, Marysa, and thanks again for coming here.
Thank you for having me as well.